Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. The ship had been traveling through empty space for 3 months now, mapping new areas that no human had ever seen before. It was quiet work, but Jake liked it. Out here, far from Earth and the busy trade routes, he could think clearly. The USS Horizon was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was one of the best. 60 crew members worked together to explore the unknown parts of the galaxy. They were scientists, engineers, soldiers, and explorers all rolled into one team. Jake was proud to be their captain. "Captain, I'm getting something strange on the communications array," called out Lisa Park from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, and she had been doing this job for 8 years. If Lisa said something was strange, it was worth paying attention to. Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of strange?" Lisa frowned at her screens. "It's a signal, but not like anything I've seen before. It's very weak, coming from somewhere far away. The pattern is weird too. It repeats every 47 minutes, exactly the same each time. Could it be natural? Maybe from a pulsar or something like that?" Jake asked. "I don't think so. Natural signals don't usually have this kind of pattern. This looks like it was made by someone, not something." Jake felt a small chill run down his spine. First contact with a new alien species was always possible when exploring unknown space, but it had never happened to him before. "Can you clean up the signal? Make it clearer?" "I can try, but it might take some time. The signal is really weak, like it's coming from very far away or from something that's almost out of power. Do it, and call Don Rodriguez up here. I want our science officer to take a look at this." Don Rodriguez arrived on the bridge 10 minutes later. He was a tall man with gray hair who had been studying alien technology for most of his adult life. If anyone could figure out what they were dealing with, it would be Don. Lisa had managed to make the signal a little clearer. Now they could hear it through the bridge speakers. It was a series of sounds that went up and down, almost like music, but not quite. There were patterns in it, but they were unlike anything in the human databases. Don listened carefully for several minutes. Then he asked Lisa to play it again and again. Finally, he turned to Jake with excitement in his eyes. "Captain, this is definitely artificial. Someone made this signal on purpose. But more than that, I think they're trying to communicate with us." "What makes you say that?" Don pointed to the display screen where Lisa had put up a visual representation of the signal. "Look at this part here. These are mathematical sequences. Basic ones that any intelligent species would understand. 2 + 2 = 4. 3 × 3 = 9. Simple stuff like that. Jake studied the screen. "So they're trying to show us they're intelligent?" "Exactly, and look at this part." Don highlighted another section of the signal. "These look like coordinates, star positions. I think they're telling us where they are." The bridge became very quiet. Everyone was listening now, even though they were pretending to work at their stations. This was the kind of moment that changed everything. "How far away?" Jake asked. Don worked on his computer for a few minutes. "If I'm reading this right, about 6 days from here at full speed. It's a star system that's not on any of our maps. Completely unexplored." Jake thought about what to do. The rules were clear about situations like this. When humans encountered unknown alien signals, they were supposed to report it to Earth immediately and wait for instructions. The Galactic Council, which humans had joined 50 years ago, had strict rules about first contact situations. But Jake also knew that if they waited for instructions from Earth, it would take weeks or maybe months to get a response, and the signal was weak, getting weaker each time they detected it. Whatever was sending it might not have much time left. "Lisa, can you tell if the signal is getting stronger or weaker?" Lisa checked her instruments. "Weaker, Captain. Each time we detect. It's a little bit fainter than the last time. At this rate, we might lose it completely in a few days." "That settles it," Jake said. "We're going to investigate. Plot a course for those coordinates, maximum speed." His first officer, Commander Amy Carter, looked concerned. "Captain, shouldn't we report this to Earth first?" "The Council has rules about this kind of thing. Amy was right, and Jake knew it. But he also knew that sometimes the right thing to do wasn't the same as following the rules. If someone was in trouble and sending out a distress signal, Jake wasn't going to let them die while bureaucrats on Earth decided what to do. We'll send a report to Earth, but we're not going to wait for permission. If someone needs help, we help them. That's what humans do. The USS Horizon changed course and began accelerating toward the unknown star system. As they got closer, the signal became stronger and clearer. Don spent hours analyzing it, and he discovered more mathematical concepts hidden in the transmission. Whoever was sending it was definitely intelligent, and they seemed to understand basic science and mathematics. On the fourth day of their journey, they began to see the star system on their long-range sensors. What they saw was troubling. The star itself was old and dying, giving off a sick red light. Several planets orbited it, but from this distance, they all looked dead and lifeless. But there was something else in the system, something that made everyone on the bridge stop and stare. "Captain," said Lieutenant Sam Johnson from the tactical station, "you need to see this." The main screen changed to show what their sensors were detecting. Floating in space near the dying star were hundreds of ships. They were unlike any human vessel Jake had ever seen. They were long and elegant, made of what looked like crystal or glass. They seemed to grow rather than be built, with flowing lines and curves that reminded Jake of living things. But something was wrong with the ships. Many of them were dark, showing no signs of power. Others were damaged, with sections missing or broken off. They were drifting aimlessly through space like leaves floating on a pond. "How many ships are there?" Jake asked. "I count over 400, Captain, maybe more." "It's hard to tell because some of them are clustered together." "Any signs of life?" "Some of the ships are still powered, but barely. Whatever happened to them, they're in bad shape." Jake made his decision. "Amy, you're our first contact specialist. I want you to try to communicate with them. Use the mathematical sequences from their signal to show them we're intelligent and friendly." Amy nodded and went to work. It took her an hour to figure out how to modify their communication system to send the same kind of signal the aliens had been using. When she finally made contact, the response was immediate. The alien voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was musical, with tones that went up and down like singing. But somehow, their computer was able to translate it into words that humans could understand. "Unknown vessel, this is Coordinator HFY of the Viridian people. We did not expect anyone to answer our call for help. Are you truly here to help us?" The voice sounded tired and sad, filled with a kind of desperation that made Jake's heart ache. Whatever had happened to these people, they had been through something terrible. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel USS Horizon. We received your signal and came to investigate. What is your situation? Do you need assistance?" There was a long pause before the alien responded. When she spoke again, her voice was filled with both hope and fear. "Captain Morrison, my people are dying. Our home world was destroyed by a plague that consumed everything. We escaped with what remains of our civilization, but our ships are failing. We have been drifting in space for months, and our power is almost gone. We sent signals to the Galactic Council begging for help, but..." Her voice trailed off and Jake could hear the pain in it. "But what?" he asked gently. "But they refused to help us. They said we were contaminated and dangerous. They forbade anyone from coming near us. Captain Morrison, the galaxy has abandoned us to die." Captain Jake Morrison sat in his quarters staring at the communication screen that showed the official seal of Earth's government. He had just finished sending his report about the Viridians to both Earth and the human representative at the Galactic Council. Now he had to wait for a response, and waiting was the hardest part. On the bridge, his crew continued to monitor the Viridian fleet. The alien ships were in worse condition than they had first thought. Don Rodriguez had spent hours scanning them with the ship's sensors, and his report was grim. More than half of the Viridian vessels had no power at all. The ones that still had some energy were running on emergency systems only. "Captain, Lisa Park called through the ship's communication system. "I'm getting a transmission from Earth." "It's Ambassador Helen Brooks." Jake hurried back to the bridge. Ambassador Brooks was humanity's voice in the Galactic Council, and she had been doing that job for 15 years. She was smart, tough, and she knew how to deal with alien politics better than anyone else in the human government. The screen flickered to life, showing a middle-aged woman with short brown hair and tired eyes. She looked like she had not slept. "In days, Captain Morrison, I've read your report. This is a very serious situation. I need you to understand exactly what you've stumbled into." "I understand that there are people dying out here, Ambassador. That seems pretty serious to me." "Helen," Brooks sighed. "Jake, I know you want to help them. That's what makes you a good captain and a good human being. But you need to know what happened when the Viridians first contacted the Council." She paused and looked at something off-screen, probably reading from a file. 3 months ago, the Viridians sent an official request for emergency assistance to the Galactic Council. They explained about the plague that destroyed their world and asked for sanctuary for their survivors. The Council debated for 2 weeks, and they said no. Worse than that. The Council declared the Viridians a contamination risk and issued what they call a quarantine order. No member species is allowed to help them in any way. No contact, no assistance, no rescue. Anyone who violates the order faces immediate expulsion from the Council. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. So they're just supposed to die out there? According to the Council, yes. The leading members believe the risk to the galaxy is too great. They think the plague might spread if anyone comes into contact with the Viridians. Have they studied this plague? Do they have any proof it can spread? Ambassador Brooks looked uncomfortable. That's where things get complicated, Jake. The Council says they don't need proof. They're using something called the precautionary principle. It means they can quarantine anyone they think might be dangerous, even without evidence. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all listening, and he could see the same anger in their faces that he felt in his heart. This was not how civilized people were supposed to behave. What does Earth's government say about this? President Nancy Webb is meeting with her advisors right now. I expect to hear from her soon. But Jake, you need to understand the position we're in. Humanity has only been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years. We're still considered a junior member. If we go against the Council on something this big, they could kick us out completely. And what would that mean? It would mean Earth would be completely alone in the galaxy. No trade agreements, no defense treaties, no access to galactic technology or knowledge. We'd be cut off from everything. The communication ended, and Jake stared at the blank screen for a long time. His crew waited quietly, knowing their captain was thinking through one of the biggest decisions of his life. 2 hours later, Lisa Park announced another incoming transmission from Earth, this time. It was President Webb herself. Jake had never spoken directly to the president before, and he felt nervous as her image appeared on the screen. President Webb was a tall woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She had been leading Earth for 6 years, and she was known for making hard decisions when they needed to be made. Captain Morrison, I've been briefed on your situation. I want you to know that your report has started the biggest debate in Earth's government since we joined the Galactic Council. What kind of debate, Madam President? The kind that decides what kind of people we want to be. My defense secretary, Chris Taylor, thinks we should follow the Council's orders. He believes that losing our membership would be a disaster for humanity. We'd lose protection from hostile alien species, and we'd lose access to technologies that have improved life for everyone on Earth. Jake nodded. He understood that argument, even if he didn't like it. But my director of xenobiology, Dr. Kate Williams, has been studying the information you sent us about the Viridian plague. She says there's no evidence that it can spread to other species. In fact, she thinks it only affects the specific biology of the Viridians themselves. So the Council is wrong? The Council might be wrong, or they might be lying, or they might just be scared. It doesn't matter which one it is. What matters is that there are people dying, and we have the power to save them. President Webb leaned forward, and Jake could see the intensity in her eyes. Captain, I'm going to ask you to do something that might end Earth's membership in the Galactic Council. I'm going to ask you to save those people anyway. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Madam President, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. We didn't become space explorers so we could follow rules that let innocent people die. We became explorers because we believe that all intelligent life has value, no matter what species it belongs to. What do you need me to do? Keep helping the Viridians any way you can? I'm mobilizing the entire human fleet under Admiral Steve Patterson's command. We're calling it Operation Sanctuary, and it's going to be the biggest rescue mission in human history. And the transmission ended, and Jake looked around at his crew. They were all smiling now, despite the danger they were about to face. You heard the president? Jake said. We're going to save these people. Amy, I want you to contact Coordinator HFY and tell her that help is coming, a lot of help. Amy Carter nodded and began working at her communication station. A few minutes later, she had the Viridian leader on the screen. Coordinator HFY looked different from humans, but Jake could still see the intelligence and sadness in her large, dark eyes. Her skin seemed to shimmer like crystal, and when she spoke, her voice had a musical quality that was beautiful and strange at the same time. Captain Morrison, did your government decide to help us? They did. We're going to get you and your people to safety, no matter what it costs us. But the Galactic Council, they will punish you for this. They will say you are breaking their laws. Jake smiled. Coordinator, sometimes the right thing to do isn't the legal thing to do. Sometimes you have to choose between following rules and saving lives. Humans choose to save lives. For the first time since they had made contact, Coordinator HFY smiled. It was a strange smile, different from a human smile, but Jake could see the hope and gratitude in it. Captain Morrison, my people have a saying. It translates roughly to, the stars remember kindness. If we survive this, the stars will remember what humanity did for us. Just focus on staying alive, Coordinator. The human fleet will be here in 4 days. Can your people hold on that long? We will try, Captain. We will try. The communication ended, and Jake looked out at the dying alien fleet floating in space. In 4 days, this empty star system was going to become the site of either the greatest rescue in galactic history or the greatest disaster. Either way, humanity had made its choice. They were going to stand up for what was right, even if it meant standing alone. Admiral Steve Patterson stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching as the largest fleet in human history prepared to jump to hyperspace. 48 ships floated in formation around Earth's moon, each one loaded with supplies, medical equipment, and the best rescue specialists humanity could find. This was Operation Sanctuary, and Steve knew that history would judge them all by what happened in the next few days. Admiral, all ships report ready for hyperspace jump, announced his communications officer, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres. Steve nodded. Signal the fleet. Operation Sanctuary is now active. All ships jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. The stars outside the bridge windows stretched into lines of light as the entire human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, heading toward the dying star system where the Viridians waited 4 days earlier when President Webb had given him command of Operation Sanctuary. Steve had thought the mission would be simple. Find the alien refugees, load them onto human ships, and take them somewhere safe. But as his experts studied the information Captain Morrison had sent back, they realized it was going to be much more complicated than that. The Viridians were silicon-based life forms, completely different from humans. They breathed a different kind of atmosphere and needed different temperatures to survive. Their ships were grown rather than built, using crystalline structures that human engineers had never seen before. Everything about them was alien, and that made rescuing them incredibly difficult. Chief Engineer Maria Santos had worked without sleep for 3 straight days, figuring out how to modify human life support systems to keep Viridians alive. She had to redesign air recycling systems, temperature controls, and even the lighting in the rescue ships. Viridians needed a specific kind of light to stay healthy. something that human technology could provide but had to be carefully calibrated. It's like trying to build an aquarium for fish you've never seen before, Maria had explained to Steve during one of their planning meetings. We know they need water, but we don't know what kind of water or how much or what temperature. We're guessing about everything. Medical Officer Dr. Paul Mitchell had faced similar challenges. How do you treat patients whose biology you don't understand? He had studied every piece of information about viridian physiology that Captain Morrison had been able to gather, but it wasn't much. The Viridians had tried to explain their medical needs, but human and Viridian medicine were so different that translation was nearly impossible. I'm a doctor, not a xenobiologist, Dr. Mitchell had told Steve. I can set broken bones and treat infections in humans. But these people are made of completely different stuff. Their bodies use silicon and crystal structures instead of carbon and bone. I don't even know if they have blood the way we understand it. Despite all the challenges, the human fleet had prepared as best they could. The 12 colony ships had been converted into temporary hospitals and living spaces for Viridian refugees. The 8 medical vessels carried every piece of equipment that might possibly help treat alien patients. The 20 cargo freighters were loaded with food, water, and emergency supplies. Even though nobody was sure if Viridians could eat human food or drink human water, when the fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the dying star system, Steve got his first look at the situation Captain Morrison had described. The Viridian ships floated in space like beautiful but broken flowers, their crystal hulls catching the sick red light of the dying star. Many of them were completely dark now, and Steve realized that more Viridians had died in the 4 days it had taken the human fleet to arrive. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Captain Morrison aboard the USS Horizon, announced Lieutenant Torres. Jake Morrison's face appeared on the main screen, and Steve could see the relief in the younger captain's eyes. Admiral Patterson, am I glad to see you? The situation here has gotten worse since my last report. We've lost contact with 18 more Viridian ships in the past 2 days. Coordinator's HFY estimates that they're losing about 50 people every day now. Steve felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. 50 people every day. That meant they had already lost 200 lives while the human fleet was traveling here. Captain Morrison, we're ready to begin immediate evacuation. What's the status of the Viridian leadership? Coordinator's HFY is aboard their flagship, a vessel they call the Heart of Stars. It's one of the few ships that still has full power. She's been working with my first contact specialist, Amy Carter, to prepare her people for evacuation. But Admiral, there's something else you need to know. Steve didn't like the tone in Jake's voice. What is it, Captain? We've detected ships approaching the system. Long-range sensors show a Galactic Council enforcement fleet about 6 hours out. They're coming fast, and they're armed. Steve had been expecting this, but it still sent a chill through him. The Galactic Council wasn't going to let humanity violate their quarantine order without a fight. How many ships? 23 that we can detect. Probably more behind them. The lead ship is broadcasting identification as the GCS Judgment flagship of Admiral Corksano of the Hegemony Defense Force. Steve knew that name. Admiral Corksano was one of the Council's most ruthless enforcers, a member of a warrior species called the Archelians. If the Council had sent him, they were serious about stopping the human rescue mission. Understood, Captain. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. We have 6 hours to get as many Viridians off those ships as possible. The next few hours were chaos. Human rescue teams, led by Lieutenant Commander Sam Johnson, shuttled back and forth between the human fleet and the dying Viridian vessels. Each trip brought back aliens who were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The Viridians were tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of living crystal. They moved gracefully, almost floating rather than walking. When they spoke, their voices created harmonious sounds that reminded the humans of singing. But despite their beauty, it was clear that they were dying. Many of the refugees were weak and sick, barely able to stand. The cultural differences made everything more difficult. Viridians didn't understand human concepts like privacy or personal space. They communicated through harmonic vibrations that sometimes damaged human equipment. Their children, who were small versions of the adults with even more translucent skin, were terrified of the strange humans trying to help them. Dr. Mitchell worked frantically to treat the sickest Viridians, but he was operating completely blind. He couldn't take their temperature because they didn't have human-style body heat. He couldn't check their pulse because their circulatory system was completely different. All he could do was try to make them comfortable and hope that the modified life support systems would keep them alive. "Admiral, we've got a problem," called out Chief Engineer Santos over the communication system. "The Viridian ship called Singing Waters just lost all power. There are 300 people aboard, and their life support is failing." Steve made a quick decision. "Dispatch the rescue ship Morning Star immediately. Get those people off that vessel now." As the rescue continued, more Viridian ships lost power and had to be evacuated completely. The human medical ships filled up with alien refugees, and still more kept coming. Steve realized they were going to run out of space long before they ran out of Viridians to rescue. "Admiral," Lieutenant Torres announced, "Admiral Corksonal is transmitting on all frequencies." The main screen changed to show an alien that looked like a cross between a lizard and a Vulf. Admiral Corksonal had yellow eyes, sharp teeth, and scales that seemed to shift color as he moved. When he spoke, his voice was harsh and filled with authority. "Human fleet, this is Admiral Corksonal of the Galactic Council Defense Force. You are in violation of quarantine. Order 2847. You will cease all contact with the contaminated vessels immediately and withdraw from this system." Steve took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Admiral Corksonal, this is Admiral Steve Patterson of the Human Fleet. We are conducting a humanitarian rescue mission. These people are dying, and we're going to help them. The quarantine order is absolute, human. Any species that violates it will face the full consequences of Council law. You have 1 hour to withdraw your ships and abandon this illegal rescue operation." Steve looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting to see what he would do. Through the windows, he could see the Viridian ships, still filled with thousands of people who would die if the humans left. "Admiral Corksonal, I have my orders from the Earth government. We don't abandon people to die. If you want to stop us, you'll have to go through us." The transmission ended, and Steve knew that the real test was about to begin. Admiral Steve Patterson watched the tactical display as the Galactic Council fleet moved into position. 23 warships arranged themselves in a battle formation, their weapons powered and ready. The lead ship, Admiral Corksonal's flagship, was twice the size of any human vessel and bristled with advanced alien technology that could probably destroy the entire human fleet. But Steve wasn't backing down. He had given orders for the human ships to form a protective barrier around the Viridian refugees. The rescue ships continued their work, moving back and forth between the dying alien vessels and the human fleet, carrying survivors to safety. Every minute they could buy meant more lives saved. "Admiral, the Council ships are demanding we stop the rescue operation," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. "Tell them we heard them the first time," Steve replied. "And, keep those rescue shuttles moving." "How many Viridians have we evacuated so far?" "About 3,000, sir. But there are still over 10,000 on the failing ships." 3,000 saved, 10,000 still in danger. Steve did the math in his head and didn't like the answer. At their current rate, it would take at least 12 more hours to evacuate everyone. He doubted Admiral Corksonal would give them 12 more minutes. On the USS Horizon, Captain Jake Morrison was making a discovery that would change everything. His science officer, Don Rodriguez, had been studying the Viridian plague with help from the alien survivors. What they found was shocking. "Captain, you need to see this," Don called from his laboratory. "I've been analyzing samples of the plague that destroyed the Viridian homeworld. This isn't a natural disease." Jake looked at the data on Dan's computer screen. "What do you mean?" "I mean, someone made this plague on purpose. It's a biological weapon designed specifically to attack Viridian biology. Look at these molecular structures. They're too precise, too targeted to be natural. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Who would do something like that? I don't know, but I found references to this kind of weapon in some old databases. There was an extinct species called the Devourers who used biological weapons to destroy entire planets. They disappeared thousands of years ago, but apparently some of their weapons are still active. Are you saying the Devourers attacked the Viridian homeworld? No, Captain, the Devourers are long gone. But someone found one of their old weapons and used it. Someone who knew exactly what it would do. Jake stared at the data, trying to understand what it meant. If the plague was an artificial weapon, then the Galactic Council's fears about contamination were wrong. The weapon was designed only to kill Viridians. It couldn't spread to other species because it was never meant to. Dan, can you prove this? Can you show that the plague isn't contagious? I already have. Look at this analysis. The weapon breaks down completely when it comes into contact with non-Viridian biology. It literally can't survive outside of Viridian tissue. The Council's contamination fears are completely baseless. Jake grabbed the data files and rushed to the bridge. This information had to get to Admiral Patterson immediately. If they could prove the Council was wrong about the contamination risk, maybe they could avoid a war, but as Jake was preparing to transmit the data, his communications officer Lisa Park made an even more shocking discovery. Captain, I've been monitoring Council communications and I picked up something strange. There's a message here from Council archives discussing previous encounters with Devourer weapons. What does it say? Lisa's face went pale as she read the message. Captain, the Council knew about the Devourer weapons all along. They have records of at least 6 other species that were attacked by these biological weapons over the past 1,000 years. Did they help those species? No, sir. According to these records, the Council classified all the attacks as natural plagues and refused assistance to the victims. They let all 6 species die rather than risk exposure. Jake felt sick. Are you saying the Council has been doing this for 1,000 years? Letting entire species die when they could have helped? That's exactly what I'm saying, Captain. And there's more. The records show that the Council has countermeasures for these biological weapons. They developed cures decades ago, but they keep them secret and only use them to protect Council member worlds. Jake stared at the evidence on his screen. The Galactic Council hadn't just abandoned the Viridians. They had deliberately let them die, knowing they could have saved them. It was genocide by neglect, and it had been happening for centuries. Lisa, transmit all of this data to Admiral Patterson immediately. Then broadcast it on all frequencies, including to the Council fleet. Everyone needs to know what we've discovered. The revelation hit the Council fleet like a bomb. Admiral Patterson watched on his tactical display as several of the Council ships suddenly broke formation. Their captains had heard the broadcast and were refusing to continue the mission. Admiral Corksonal's voice came over the communication system, filled with rage. Human vessels, you will cease broadcasting classified Council information immediately. You are committing an act of war against the Galactic Council. Steve stepped forward to respond. Admiral Corksonal, we're committing an act of truth. Your Council has been letting innocent people die for centuries when you had the power to save them. The galaxy deserves to know. The Council's decisions are made for the greater good of all species. You cannot understand the complexities of galactic politics. I understand right from wrong, Steve replied. And letting people die when you can save them is wrong, no matter how you try to justify it? As the argument continued, more ships in the Council fleet began to withdraw. The captain of a vessel called the Far Wanderer transmitted a message saying his crew refused to participate in what they now understood to be genocide. The commander of another ship announced that her species had suffered a similar plague 50 years ago and had begged the Council for help, only to be abandoned just like the Viridians, but Admiral Corksonal still had loyal ships, and he was growing desperate. The truth about the Council's policies was spreading across the galaxy as other species picked up the human broadcasts. His political masters would blame him if he allowed this information to continue spreading. "All loyal vessels, prepare to fire on the human fleet," Corksonal commanded. "We will stop this illegal rescue operation by force." Steve watched as 8 Council ships moved into attack position, their weapons powered up, targeting the human vessels that were still evacuating Viridian refugees. "Admiral," called his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Tony Garcia, "Council ships are locking weapons on us. They're preparing to fire." Steve had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but he had prepared for it. All ships, defensive positions. Protect the evacuation vessels at all costs. If they fire on us, we fire back, but only to disable, not destroy. The moment stretched out like an eternity. 2 fleets faced each other across the void, with thousands of innocent lives hanging in the balance. The Viridian refugees watched. From their rescue ships, understanding that their fate would be decided in the next few minutes, finally, Admiral Corksonal gave the order. "Fire!" The Council ships opened fire with weapons that lit up space like deadly fireworks. But instead of targeting the human warships, they aimed at the evacuation vessels that were carrying Viridian refugees. Steve felt rage like he had never experienced before. They weren't just trying to stop the rescue. They were trying to murder the people the humans had already saved. All ships return fire, take out their weapon systems. Show them what happens when you attack innocent people? The human fleet responded with precision and fury. Their weapons, though less advanced than Council technology, were operated by people who were fighting for something they believed in. Within minutes, 3 of the attacking Council ships were disabled, their weapons destroyed, and their hulls breached. Captain Ben Hayes aboard the USS Liberty managed to position his ship between the Council forces and the evacuation vessels. When a Council ship tried to fire on a transport full of Viridian children, Hayes rammed his vessel into the alien warship, disabling both ships but saving the refugees. The battle lasted only 20 minutes, but when it was over, the remaining Council ships were retreating and the human rescue operation continued. Admiral Corksonal's flagship limped away with severe damage, broadcasting threats about the consequences of defying the Council. Steve looked at the damage reports from his fleet. 3 human ships were severely damaged and 17 crew members had been injured, but no one had died. More importantly, the evacuation of the Viridians could continue. "Admiral," Lieutenant Torres announced, "we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. 17 different species are announcing their withdrawal from the Galactic Council. They're saying they want to join with humanity in forming a new alliance." Steve smiled for the first time in days. Sometimes standing up for what's right meant standing alone. But sometimes, if you stood long enough, you discovered you weren't alone after all. 6 months after the rescue of the Viridian people, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the space station New Hope, watching as ships from 17 different species worked together to build humanity's first major diplomatic station. The construction was unlike anything he had ever seen. Human engineers worked alongside Viridian crystal growers, while other alien species contributed their own unique technologies to the project. The station floated in orbit around a planet called New Harmony, which had become the new home for most of the Viridian survivors. It was a beautiful world with crystal formations that reminded the Viridians of their lost homeworld. But without the deadly plague that had destroyed their original civilization. Jake smiled as he watched a group of human children playing with young Viridians in the station's garden area. The alien children looked like small versions of their parents, with translucent skin that sparkled in the artificial sunlight. Despite their differences, the children had no trouble communicating through gestures and laughter. "Captain Morrison," called a familiar musical voice behind him. Jake turned to see Coordinator HFY approaching. She looked much healthier than she had during those desperate days in the dying star system. Her crystalline skin now glowed with inner light, and her movements were graceful and strong. She had been elected as the first Viridian representative to what was now called the Free Worlds Coalition. "Coordinator, it's good to see you. How are your people adjusting to their new homes?" Better than we ever dared hope, she replied, her voice creating harmonious tones that Jake had grown to love. New harmony is more beautiful than we imagined, and the other two worlds you gave us, Crystal Falls and Haven's Rest, are perfect for our different communities. But more than that, Captain, we have something we never had before. What's that? Hope. For the first time in years, my people believe in the future again. Jake nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The rescue had been just the beginning. After the battle with Admiral Corksonal and the revelation about the Council's cruel policies, everything had changed very quickly. President Nancy Webb had announced that Earth was officially withdrawing from the Galactic Council and forming a new alliance with any species that believed in helping each other instead of abandoning the weak. The response had been overwhelming. 17 species had immediately left the Council to join with humanity, and more were asking to join every week. The Free Worlds Coalition, as they called themselves, operated on a simple principle that was revolutionary in galactic politics: no one gets left behind. When any member species faced a crisis, the entire coalition would help. It was the opposite of everything the old Galactic Council represented. Admiral Steve Patterson had been appointed as the coalition's first supreme commander, and he had done an amazing job building the new alliance. Instead of the Council's rigid hierarchy where some species were more important than others, the coalition treated all members as equals. Decisions were made by consensus and every species had a voice. Captain, HFY continued, I want to tell you that our scientists have made a breakthrough working with your Dr. Kate Williams. Jake's interest was immediately caught. Dr. Williams had been leading a joint research team studying the Devourer biological weapons, trying to develop better defenses against them. What kind of breakthrough? We have not only created a cure for the plague that destroyed our world, but we have developed treatments for all known Devourer biological weapons. More than that, our combined technologies have produced medical advances that will help every species in the coalition. Jake felt a surge of pride. The cooperation between human and Viridian scientists had been incredible to watch. Human creativity and determination combined with Viridian knowledge of crystalline structures and biological systems had produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. There's something else, HFY added. Our long-range sensors have detected something troubling. There are Devourer machines still active in the outer rim of the galaxy. Automated systems that have been sleeping for thousands of years are beginning to wake up. Jake felt a chill. The Devourers had been extinct for millennia, but apparently they had left behind automated weapons that could still cause destruction. How dangerous are these machines? Very dangerous. They are programmed to destroy all life they encounter, and they have been spreading slowly through uninhabited systems. Eventually, they will reach worlds with living populations. Have you reported this to the coalition leadership? Yes, and Admiral Patterson is already preparing a response. But Captain, there is something ironic about the situation. What do you mean? We have detected distress signals from several systems near the Devourer machines. Species that are still. Members of the Galactic Council are asking for help, but the Council is refusing to act. They say the risk is too great. Jake shook his head in disgust. Even after everything that had happened, the Galactic Council was still abandoning people who needed help. So what is the coalition going to do? What we always do, HFY replied with what Jake had learned was the Viridian equivalent of a smile. We are going to help them, whether they are coalition members or not. As if summoned by their conversation, Jake's communication device beeped with an incoming message. It was from Admiral Patterson himself. Captain Morrison, report to Conference Room 7 immediately. We have a situation that requires your expertise. Jake excused himself from Coordinator HFY and made his way through the station's corridors. New Hope was bustling with activity as representatives from dozens of species worked together on various projects. He passed a group of engineers from the aquatic Delphinian species working with human technicians to design new underwater colonies. In another section, he saw scholars from the highly intellectual Mentari species teaching human children advanced mathematics. Conference Room 7 was filled with holographic displays, showing star charts and tactical information. Admiral Patterson stood at the center, pointing to a system marked in red on the main display. "Jake, good to see you. We've got our first major test as a coalition, and I want the USS Horizon to lead the mission." Jake studied the display. "What's the situation, Admiral?" "A species called the Zephyrians. They're not coalition members, still loyal to the old Galactic Council, but they're under attack by automated devour machines, and the Council has refused to help them. So they contacted us? Actually, no. They're too proud to ask for help from what they consider to be rebels against galactic order. We found out about their situation from our own intelligence networks." Jake understood immediately. "You want us to help them even though they didn't ask for it?" "That's exactly what I want. The Zephyrians have about 2 million people on their homeworld, and the Devourer machines will reach them in about 10 days. The old council would let them die rather than risk their own ships. We're going to show the galaxy that there's a better way." Admiral Patterson handed Jake a datapad with mission details. "You'll be commanding a task force of 12 ships, including vessels from 6 different coalition species. Your job is to destroy the Devourer machines and save the Zephyrian people, whether they want to be saved or not." Jake looked at the mission parameters. It would be dangerous, and there was no guarantee the Zephyrians would even be grateful. They might see the coalition as invaders rather than rescuers. "Admiral, what if the Zephyrians order us to leave? What if they refuse our help?" Steve Patterson smiled. "And we help them anyway, and leave. Sometimes doing the right thing means not getting thanked for it." "But Jake, I have a feeling this mission is going to change a lot of minds about what the coalition represents." As Jake prepared to leave for his new mission, he thought about how much had changed since that day when they first detected the Viridian distress signal. Humanity had gone from being a junior member of a cold, bureaucratic galactic government to leading an alliance based on compassion and mutual aid. The USS Horizon departed New Hope 12 hours later, leading a fleet that included human ships, Viridian crystal vessels, and technology from dozens of other species. As they jumped to hyperspace, Jake knew they were heading toward another defining moment for the coalition. The galaxy was learning that there was an alternative to the Galactic Council's policy of abandonment. Species didn't have to face crises alone anymore. Help was coming, whether they asked for it or not, because no one deserved to be left behind. As the fleet traveled through hyperspace toward the Zephyrian system, Jake received a message from Communications Officer Lisa Park. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian government. They're asking who we are and demanding to know why we're approaching their system." Jake smiled. "Tell them we're the people who don't let others die alone. Tell them help has arrived." The message was sent, and Jake settled back in his captain's chair, ready for whatever came next. The Free Worlds Coalition had begun with the rescue of one desperate alien race, but Jake had a feeling it was just the beginning of something much larger. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant when humanity decided that everyone deserved to be saved.